You give me a 5 count?
4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everyone to the next specially called PDA for Athens-Clarke County and the city of Winterville, partial Little Boulevard. Today is the 8th and we're starting at 5:34. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'd like to motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I did have one comment to make before we approve it, and Dan, you can chime in on this. Is that we decided by email about 8 of the people who asked for more than the full amount, even though the calculated amount was less. And I think we had a consensus that we were going to do that. We obviously sent the letters out, but Dan was indicating that we need to formally approve that. It's not on the agenda, so I don't know whether we can add it to the agenda.
I'd make a motion to amend the agenda to include that item.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
How much notice was given of the meeting? Was it more than 24 hours?
Ilka, you're muted.
No, we weren't able to post it 24 hours in advance.
Then the meeting, the agenda can't be amended. We're limited to what's on the agenda.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to
Sorry.
approve it posthumously at another time.
Okay.
Okay. So, given that we will table our amendment to the agenda, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say yes or raise your hand, whatever. Got too many screens going. All right. Opposed? All right. The agenda passes as is. The next thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. And I'll be honest that I didn't really get much of a chance to look at it. But
Make a motion for approval of said minutes.
okay. All right. Do you have a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay. Stephanie's got a second. Discussion. Does anybody see anything on the minutes of the last meeting that need to be corrected? Okay. I'm not hearing anything, so call the motion, and all those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, say aye or raise your hands or do something.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the minutes pass unanimously. All right, now to get into the meat of today's discussion, which I hope we can finish in an hour or less than an hour. It's the topic of nonprofits. I've read your email twice, Dan, and I got a little bit of an understanding, but frankly, I didn't get enough of an understanding to really be able to wrap my head around it. So anyway, do you mind leading the discussion of the issues around that?
I'd be glad to do that. I spared you. I have stuff I could have sent, lots of. In fact, I've
I bet you did.
had a lot of that stuff. Then I thought, this is not going to work. I'm going to need to explain that. So I'm ready to do it. You kind of following the text of the email. In our earlier discussions, we've talked about what turned out to be due process. And, you know, some of the things that Stephanie identified right away as distinguishing nonprofits from for-profits. Judge Murphy up in North Georgia this is the only case in the country ever to deal with that. Identified pretty much the same thing. So nonprofits for due process purposes have distinctions between for-profits. So if your decision can be to exclude nonprofits can be justified under due process issues as having been justified by real factors that don't have to do with being a nonprofit, but with things like their access to capital and their ability to tap other programs and things like that, then you pass the due process issue. So that we can check off on good note. I'm giving you that first. The other thing is that Espinoza case that we talked about, I think the day after it came out, and that wasn't that long ago, it was a few months ago. The legal commentators, there's not much authority on that. There's 4 or 5 or maybe 6 scholarly pieces. I mean, how much of a scholar can you be in a couple of months? But there are folks that write learned articles, and I read them. And it boils down to this: the distinction, and the Supreme Court, there were 9 justices, and there were 7 opinions. Everybody had an opinion. The ones in favor wrote concurring opinions, and the dissenters wrote different dissenting opinions. So one thing's for sure: Wyoming, you can't do what you did. The rest of it is not as clear, but the case seems to stand for the principle that you can't take state action against a person or an entity based on their religious status as such. And that almost brings us back to due process, doesn't it? So you've got to find some distinction between a religious nonprofit and everybody else based on something other than religion. And there are ways there's other hairs that could be split. It's kind of like the other bonus points issue that we talked about last time, where you look at what the case law is doing. We're not a government. We don't have the power of taxation. We can't send out the cops to arrest people. We're just a development authority. But the line of cases and things like MFBE haven't reached development authorities yet, but they're headed in that direction. And I think that it's the same thing with the line of cases having to do with including or excluding religious nonprofits. No, this is brand new. You used to be able to do it. There's the Blaine Amendment to the Georgia Constitution and a bunch of others that we talked about before, which says that you can't take money out of the public treasury to benefit, a religious organization. So the piece that I selected to send to you out of these handful of learned articles basically says that the case trumps no aid clauses found in most state constitutions. So, not the Georgia Constitution, but the Wyoming Constitution that's affected by this. But the scholars say that really, how are you going to distinguish it when it comes to your Constitution? So I'm increasingly nervous about excluding a nonprofit just on the basis of them being a religious nonprofit. I don't think the law is there yet, but if we happen to be the next test case, we might be the ones to find out, well, congratulations, you're at tag like Wyoming was in Espinoza.
Hey, Dan, I have a question.
I thought you might.
If we offer loans to nonprofits, one of the filing requirements we require of every business is a tax return, and churches are exempt from filing tax returns, so they couldn't meet the documentation requirements for our application.
That's true. But I've noticed in these emails some efforts to work around lack of documentation and find a proxy for the information that you're looking for. And judges are pretty inventive in this area in terms of ascribing improper motives to folks and saying, you're saying it's this, but it's really that. I mean, y'all know what I mean. But
I get it.
If I thought about this, if there were some thing having to do with access to different sources of capital or grant programs or something that were attributable to a religious organization, then that might be something legitimate to look at. But the fact that we're having this conversation about trying to find a way to distinguish, and we're talking about religious organizations right there, is not a good fact.
Well, I think all 501c3s have the ability to do all these other things and go after, other grants and other things that regular businesses can't do easily, right? And that excluding of non-sectarian versus, sectarian. a 501c3 can do the same thing, and they still have opportunities to get other funds, which we've talked about before. That's why we excluded them in the first place, because nonprofits had other opportunities for getting income or getting money for their.
And that's a valid argument to exclude all nonprofits, but perhaps not a valid argument to include all nonprofits except for religious nonprofits.
So that's fine. They can apply. They may get it, they may not, but they probably don't have an occupation tax certificate. I guarantee you they don't. There are nonprofits that, well, that's the thing. Some are exempt because they don't do commercial business with the public, so they wouldn't have that. And we talked about a way to calculate that grant money based on some other things for those nonprofits that are exempt. So they'll apply. Maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't.
And I think that's fair. You're not excluded, but you're not given a preference either. You've got to compete for the funds along with everybody else on the same basis. And there's nothing in my book wrong with that.
But I've got to, like the only thing I'm accepting on this time around is a tax return. Like no business has any other option but to give a tax return, and churches don't have a tax return.
They do have 990s that they have to submit.
They do not have to. They're exempt from it. Some do submit it, but they don't have to.
And some have 501c3 determinations, but there's a law or a regulation that says they don't have to have one. You can't sell 501c3 bonds without getting one. So there are things that cause distinctions, either because of the way the law and regulations and ordinances are written, or because some choose to comply or to comply when they don't have to and others don't. But we're not responsible for that.
So, okay, let's just say we don't limit it to secular. That's
so it's not like we're making.
Yeah. Now, what about the restricting it to 501c3 public charities and not private foundations or other org types?
Well, that brings me to my next point. Have y'all ever looked up all the different ways that you can illegally discriminate?
I know.
I almost sent you a page out of FindLaw. It's amazing. How do we go through the day without doing something wrong? There's so many of those laws. And it's the issue here is by selecting that as a gate that folks have to pass through, does it have the effect? We're not doing it for discriminatory reasons, but does it have the effect of discriminating? And I don't know.
Why is the federal government allowed to do it?
Because the U.S. Constitution means what the Supreme Court says it means.
So we can't do it, but they can.
And the Georgia General Assembly is the same way. Open meetings, open records. I can give you my gut on that, and that's the best I can do. Let's take churches as an example. You are not required to pay income taxes, for example, as a church, unless you have a 501c3 determination. But you can get it, and if you want to borrow money tax exempt, you have to. So somebody could do that. They could go get a 501c3 determination if they don't have one. That would be our response to that. And the real issue is this a reasonable means to implement the program? And that's what it comes back to. Is this a reasonable, non-discriminatory means to implement the program? And my gut's telling me that it is. I can't give you a legal opinion on that, but to me, it makes sense. And it's not something that we included with any kind of evil intent. We included it because we were trying to find a way to administer a program fairly.
So you're saying we could include a restriction to 501c3s, without a lot of worry.
Well, I'm telling you, I can't give you a legal opinion to that effect, but my gut's telling me that would it's something I could defend. We'd have a story. It's defensible. I can't tell you I'd win, but I can tell you I've got something to defend you based on.
So we allow any 501c3 even if they're a church, if they're a 501c3, and even if they're a private foundation, if they're a 501c3. I'm fine with that.
We're taking some risk to do that, but life is risk, and we have a rational reason for doing it. It gives us grounds for defense.
Okay.
I'm not clear on the documentation that we would require them to determine how much, if any, we give them.
Oh, for the grant, we would do it based on their 941, their DOL-4, or a spreadsheet they submitted with a list of employees working in second quarter, their average hours per week, which we would just calculate in FTE, and then give them the grant that they would an OTC. But some nonprofits are required to have occupation tax if they do commercial business with the public, like Sine and Nucci Space and Habitat, those things. So if they don't have OTC, they're not eligible.
Well, and I could make an argument in favor. Remember, this is the other thing that's on my list. All that we are statutorily allowed to do with this money is to promote industry, agriculture, and trade. So if we have something that has the effect of rewarding commerce, that's in line with our governmental mission under our statute.
That would be a very limited number of nonprofits in Athens that would have occupation tax that actually does business with the public. This is a small number. I wouldn't want to exclude all those other ones if they can still promote. I mean, they promote the public good through social services they provide, which promote. I mean, you could make the argument that they are an underpinning to have to spend money on their services because they provide it, and the government could spend that other money on trade, agriculture, and industry. I mean, they are the underpinnings of why we have money to spend like this.
Well, relieving the burdens of government is one way that you get to be a 501c3.
Right.
We do still have in the program documents to check off where they're going to pick some of those public benefits. It will do that. Okay, good.
Remember, on the grant, they just have to pick one. It's the loan where it benefits them. And there's the question of, do we want to do loans and grants for nonprofits or just grants? And at this point, I don't care. The problem is how we evaluate those loans. And we won't have all the information we need to evaluate a loan without a tax return. So for a nonprofit, that's a 990, right? But nonprofits aren't driven by a motive profit. So if one of the ways we're talking about ranking people this time, and I haven't talked to y'all about this, the bank and I have talked about it, is using a debt service ratio instead of this cash balance thing, because that didn't bear out fruit for us. And that's looking at their net income from last year, taking what they're asking for in a loan, calculating the debt service payments they would need for a year, and figure out what's their ratio. Anyone above a 1 gets extra points. If you're below 1, you only get 2 points. So nonprofits without a profit motive might not have much net income, and they would be low on the ranking by nature of the kind of business they are. And I felt that might be unintentionally discriminated. And neither does the bank.
Oh.
Well, if we can't come up with a reasonably sound way of evaluating them, we either don't give them a loan, just allow them to apply for grants, or we just don't. I know people want to give it to nonprofits, but we could also continue the original stance that we don't do nonprofits.
Yeah. I mean, it is a sound way to evaluate loans. It's just that nonprofits are at a disadvantage already. When I amendments at First American, for nonprofits, they start digging into their current assets, long-term assets, other liabilities, like all this other information that if we require it of them, we have to require it of other businesses, and it just really overcomplicates things. It is possible that a nonprofit will have income at the end of a year, and it's possible that nobody will be disqualified because we have less. But in the case where we have more applications than we can fund, probably nonprofits or businesses that lost money last year are going to get cut out of the picture. Are we okay with that?
Wait, can I just interject something? What if we only allowed nonprofits that have things like stores like Habitat for Humanity with the Restore, or Nucci Space that has public, that has event space, or Cine, same thing. I mean, because those guys can't do business if people can't gather. Why couldn't we do it that way?
It's just we could. I mean, I don't know that we legally can. Dan will have to answer that, but it is a really small number of nonprofits that do business like that. But those businesses also have the ability to raise money like every other nonprofit. So they actually have more advantage than a nonprofit that does not have a commercial outlet. So
You might imagine that those nonprofits that have a cash register as part of their operation would be the ones who, both in kind of Erica's thinking, may need some replacement support given the losses that they probably incurred between March and now, and would under the metrics that we've defined be most likely to get the money too. So maybe it just plays into our hands in a way.
Yeah, and
grant side,
providing, yeah, and they're providing, yes, exactly. That part of their business model is that cash register is selling some goods to the public, and they haven't been able to do that in the same way.
that makes sense on the loan side, but the grant side, it does not make sense because we don't look at that to determine the grants.
Well, and we're further restricting what kind of nonprofits. If we restrict to the ones that have brick and mortar places, and we're really restricting the access, and others would really kick up a fuss.
I'm fine with going.
I think it'd be more of a risk at that.
I'm fine with going with all 501c3s and just recognizing that no process is perfect. Certainly even among the for-profit businesses, we've had lots of foibles around what kind of documentation people have internally. And, so I would rather do as much good as possible rather than unnecessarily restrain ourselves from doing good.
Okay. So all 501c3s, religious or otherwise, and they can apply for both loans and grants.
And we have a clear way to actually evaluate them.
We do have a clear way to evaluate both loans and grants if you guys are okay that most nonprofits are exempt from having occupation tax. So to evaluate those, we have to look at their forms that we ask everybody else to use for employment verification. But they do not have a business license because they don't do business with the public.
Well, we have to modify the program then, because the program requires 2 years of business occupation tax. They have to, we'd have to relax that then if we don't require those 2 years.
But you can see on the Form 990 when they were formed, right? Stephanie,
Yeah,
from when we were looking at it the other day. So that piece would be mostly to know that they've been around long enough that they're already up and going, and not a startup necessarily.
I mean, there are official businesses. They are just exempt. Like the law excludes them from having to have occupation tax. So it doesn't make them an illegitimate business. They are legally in business. They just don't have to pay occupation tax.
Stephanie, would it work to have them check a box that say, here's our proof of occupation tax, or check the box for exempt? Would that do?
I've already got the application enabled so that it asks if they're a nonprofit. It asks whether they're exempt or non-exempt from occupation tax. And if they're not exempt, they have to produce proof that they have it. We have to see. We ask them to submit their documentation proving employment number. So I've already built all that. I just need y'all to be okay with that. And if it does require a program change, we have to do it if we're going to allow nonprofits to apply.
But we have to change the program if we're going to allow nonprofits. We have no choice. We have to modify our program documentation to allow for it. If
We
that's
have
what
to
we're
change
deciding
anyway
to do.
for the 1 to 20 now.
I know. That's what we've already decided on.
I would just have that exempt box as part of our form.
And do all the program changes have to go back through Blaine Williams and then over to the bank again?
Yes.
Okay.
We can provide a comparison, a black line, and he can look at it quickly. I mean, Blaine's very, very good to work with, and the bank's been very, very good to work with too.
Yeah.
The bank, I've talked to them about all the changes so they know what's going on. I just said it's all pending us have this discussion tonight and agree on it. But this thing is supposed to open Monday at 8 a.m., so I don't know about those program documents being modified in time.
I think we need to really look at delaying to Tuesday, just thinking about the things that we have to get done before then, because we'll need to do a Zoom call with the application volunteers so that they'll know the changes and how to help the businesses with the application process. I've got a good draft that's already been reviewed by the PIO, but we need to add in the nonprofit information to do a push and release out. I've started reaching out and have a set of nonprofit email addresses in a way to get the information out to the nonprofits in addition to the businesses. But there's these few more steps that I think it would be wise for us to delay the open date to maybe at least Tuesday, just to give us enough time to get the program documents over, everything updated, let our volunteers know what's happening before it's live. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay. So Dan, are you the one that has revised those program documents, or what do you need from us?
It would be more efficient for me to review somebody else's changes. Does anybody feel like they're able to go through and take what we have now, strike through it, get it run through the machine again and get it back? Or if you like, I can do that. I probably can't do it until this weekend, but I can do it.
I think what we could do is Stephanie can make the changes, and then what I can do is do the PDFs like I did before and just go through and use the highlighter feature to highlight the things that have changed, and then we can send them to Blaine and just have maybe a bullet pointed list, like here are the things we added in the changes, because there aren't really there's not really a lot of change.
That's right. But if you can do that and send it to me, I'll stop what I'm doing and look at it right away.
Is it a Word doc or what? I haven't actually seen the program documents specifically.
Basically, what I go in and do is I do a PDF of every page of the website and what we've got on the website. It just creates a PDF kind of document, and then I just merge them all into one, so it's all in there together. Eligibility, and then a copy of the application.
Yeah, because it's already changed now, so I'm not sure how we're going to show the changes the way that you've done it.
Convert it to Word and then do a comparison.
I mean, it's not convertible to Word, it's in a PDF form. So the website has changed. I have the old application, yes, but the website content is now different based on this new criteria.
He's got the old version. I could just highlight the new things and then write him some bullet points, like notes this 1 to 20 is now, 1 to 10 was previous. We did not previously have nonprofits. Now we're doing nonprofits.
It's just for explanation to him. It's not anything the public will ever see. It's just here's the new ones, and you're telling him what the differences are.
Well, and the board needs to see the changes too to make sure everybody's in agreement. But Ilka, I have the PDF of what we launched with. So if you want to mark up, it's the best way to do this. Just do what you were going to do with a PDF and send it to me. And I think my software will convert them to Word. It's very, very good at that. And then I can compare the two documents.
How do you do the form when there's all that conditional stuff about whether they're a nonprofit or a public business and all the different iterations of that process?
Trying to think how I did it last time. It wasn't as complicated last time because there weren't as many routes. The only two different routes last time was whether you had electronic documents or a tax return. I think that was the only choose your own. What was it? Choose your own adventure books.
Well, there was loan only, grant only, loan to grant. How did you handle that?
I just did a screenshot of the application and then just went through each screen.
Okay.
I think I probably did loan and grant, so then it would all show when I did it.
Okay. All right.
And we're very clear on what documentation for loans for 501c3s. I still,
Yeah. I mean, we're going to ask the same information. It's net income and then how much money they're asking for and what the calculated payments are every month times 12. And then you divide that by net income to figure out what their debt service ratio is. I already have the matrix already set up for scoring it. I've run through it with the bank. It's good if we agree that nonprofits are getting loans. That's the only thing we had to decide on.
So if we're ready, I'm glad to make a motion.
okay, Kelly, why don't you spell it out?
Sure. So I would move that in the next round, in addition to allowing organizations with up to 20 employees, we allow 501c3s to submit, and that we allow them to opt out of the occupational tax requirement, and that would be reflected in the application documents, and that we forward this to ACC manager Blaine Williams for review with the intention to launch the applications on Tuesday the 13th.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Do we think we'll have it all ready by Tuesday with approvals?
I'll see what I can do.
See, if the board has to approve the changes, we got another special call meeting to officially.
I mean,
We
website has, I have the application completed. I could send y'all the link to it tonight and y'all can look at it. But the difference, David, is there's a question that says, are you a for-profit business, which is everybody that we've already done, with 1 to 20 employees, or a nonprofit? And only if you answer nonprofit does it ask if you're exempt from occupation tax or not exempt. That is the only difference in anything we're collecting from people, except that we took out electronic accounting. It's just tax return and give us your revenue for second quarter. So it's the option if you didn't have electronic accounting last time, that's everybody's going through that now. So it's much simpler, actually.
Hold on, I'm trying to write this down. Let me make sure I have it correct. The motion is to approve, the motion is to allow businesses with 20 or more employees and or 501c3 nonprofits to apply for loans and grants per approval of the language from the city manager, correct?
Correct.
It's
y'all want to see the application just so you know what you're agreeing to?
I think that's the way to do it. I mean, the motion is sufficient. We create the documents, circulate them to the board. If anybody says that's not what I voted in favor of, then we have to have another meeting.
All right, let me just pull up the application. It shouldn't take long to do this.
And I just converted a page into Word, and it's not beautiful, but it worked.
Yeah, if you've got the professional Adobe Acrobat, it'll do a paint job for you.
You can do it. Yeah.
I have Nitro, and I like that better than Adobe.
This is the application, and we're going to have to change these dates if we're actually moving it to October 13th, but that's fine. So you're doing the certification that you suffered a business income loss, and then you're answering your business is a private for-profit or public nonprofit, which we're going to have to take out the word public because there are nonprofits that are not public, they're private, and that's the foundation. So it'll just be a charitable 501c3 organization. So that'll be the wording that we have there. So here's where it explains that if you are not engaged in the daily selling of goods or services, that you are exempt from it. So you say, yes, we are exempt because we're not engaged in the daily selling of goods, or no, we're not exempt. If you answer, yes, you are exempt, you have to provide the proof of employee count that every business has to provide. If you answer, no, we are not exempt, it then asks you, have you filed and paid occupation tax for these 2 periods, yes or no? And this question is now being asked of all businesses. And instead of having them say, you know, I paid this much in tax, that was confusing people. It's just, did you file or not? Because we're going to look up and see how much they paid, because that's what we're doing anyways.
Right.
If they answer yes, then it just moves them on to provide your employee count. Again, that's what every business gets. If they say no, it says, don't proceed. You're not eligible. And if a private business answers no to that question, they get the same message that if they're not sure, call the occupation tax office and then come back and apply if you know that you are eligible. This is the difference in what we're doing. So it's really a lot simpler for businesses. Now, what I don't have in here is the way for nonprofits to apply for loans. So I have to modify this logic because we've agreed that we're going to let them apply for loans. And the only thing that will change in that case is if I pick private nonprofit, the next thing it's going to ask me is which one of these, where now that only happens for private businesses. This process, same as it was, except it doesn't ask about electronic accounting. It asks for a business tax return. And I'm actually going to take bank statements off because we're not going to use that. Gross revenue before expenses and cost of goods, and then net income after expense and cost of goods. Because we did allow, like when we evaluated the last set, if their gross did not reflect a 25% loss, we looked at their net to see if they had a loss. And we agreed that we gave them loans if they had a loss at net income. So we wanted to look at both of them. I'll have to put something in here. And all the rest of this is the same. But, I got to go take out all the secular references because it's scattered all over the website. I've got quite a bit of changes to make. But I think what I want to say is the substantive changes are what we just discussed about nonprofits and not limiting it to non-secular, or not limiting it to secular or private foundations, just be all 501c3s, and that they can apply for both loans and grants. So I have to modify this to fix it to allow for that.
So if we allow religious and faith-based nonprofits to apply, does that mean we'll also allow religious and faith-based businesses to apply?
We're going to have to take out the word religious. So yes, we'll have to. But most likely, if they're religious or faith-based businesses, they might be nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there could be some that are for-profit, but I can't think of any right now in my mind.
A bookstore, maybe.
Yeah.
We are capturing debt ratio information from what you've shown us.
That comes from the tax return, and then those two numbers they give us.
But you said they're not required to give a tax return.
What's that, David?
You said that they aren't required to do a tax return. They're nonprofits.
Nonprofits, 501c3s are required to do 990s, but churches are not required to be 501c3s and do not have to have a 990. But Dan, I believe if they are a 501c3, if they have more than $50,000 a year, they have to file a 990. Is that right?
I'm not sure, but I do know that they file 990s, and I thought all of them did.
If it's above $50,000 of revenue a year, they could file this short form if it's less, but they don't even have to. Just kind of non-factors. But you cannot get a loan in any bank if you do not have financials or a tax return. So churches would never be able to get a loan without that. So they must have some sort of return if they're trying to take on debt. So they don't have it. They can't get debt from a bank either. So we're not discriminating on them if we don't give them a loan.
No, but if they don't upload, if they ask for a loan and they don't upload the tax return information, then we'd have to disqualify them.
They won't be able to apply without uploading something in that field. I mean, I guess they could upload a document that says we don't have a tax return, and we're going to have to say, well, we can't give you a loan because we require a tax return. And it's not just for fun, it's because we're using it to rank businesses on the ability to repay. And Dan, you told us we should be making loans that are favorable to the county. So we can't do that without that information.
I'm trying to think what would be an acceptable substitute. Audited financial statements, maybe?
I mean, they could give us that for sure. But then we have to allow businesses to do that. And I don't want to trust their electronic accounting records because I saw the mess that they were. And if they haven't filed a tax return, that concerns me.
Well, it goes back to what is a reasonable means for implementing the program. And you've got to have some standards. I'm not saying that somebody might not come up and say, well, we could have given you an audited financial statements. Why wouldn't you take those? Well, our answer is we want the full force and power of the federal government behind your providing absolutely accurate information that you're held responsible for. You know, there's just, as Kelly said earlier, there's no perfect answer. I think it's defensible. I think what you said makes sense. And we have to make a decision. And I'm not, this is not one of those jumping up and down things for me. If you've got to have a tax return or a 990 and you don't have it, then you can't provide the data that we have to have, and then we have to defend why we made that rule, and you voiced the defense.
I mean, also, we're not a staffed organization that has financial experts that can analyze their or their financial statements to make that decision. We're doing the decision making. The bank is simply administering the funds.
Well, you know, that old saying about just because your friend jumped off the roof doesn't mean that you can jump off the roof. But I can tell you what y'all are doing. I think it's the best in the state. It may not be the best in the state, but it's better than hardly anything else I have seen. You wouldn't believe what some of these DDAs are doing, for example. So we're being very professional about it. And I'm very impressed with and I'm not talking about the Athens DDA. I had another one in mind.
Oh, I wasn't thinking that.
But I do think you're asking the right questions, and we've got answers for them. And I don't have a better answer. I mean, I can warn you all day long. Lawyers are good at that. So I mean, you can't even say the best way to stay safe is do nothing, because there's risks attached with that. But we have a standard. We have a rational reason for it. It's going to have the effect probably of excluding some people that would have been good loans or good grantees. But I don't know how we can make the program perfect.
Okay, I want to quickly look at the matrix because I know David has questions about how this is getting calculated, and those are valid questions. You'll see it looks really much like the last matrix we had, except now we've got a field for what did they request in their loan. So you key in a number, you put in their revenue from last year. We know that these people don't meet the requirement. They're not eligible because they only have a 20% loss. Let me make it 60. They had a net profit, and this is a very important number because this comes back to the debt service ratio. So net profit of $12,000 last year. So they have a 19 times debt ratio. This means that they can pay that amount of loan back 19 times. So they're a good quality loan, yes. Now, if their net profit was $2,000 last year, there's less than a 1 ratio. Like, they can't even pay that $680 a month. They don't have the income in a normal year to pay that back. So they get very few points for that, but it doesn't disqualify them. It just puts them lower in the ranking if we get more demand than we have money. That's the only effect that it has. And you've noticed I've taken out the female and minority owned question. So let me show you the scoring, because we had to reassociate points. I didn't change the public benefit points at all. I took the cash balance points and turned them into the debt service ratio points. Revenue loss did not change, and days of cash is no longer being used, and I left profitable before COVID. So really, I supplanted the cash ranking with debt service ratio, and I removed the community benefit, and I think I maybe allocated some more points in one of these areas to compensate for that 10 points. But these are not being used anymore.
Okay. So do we need to modify the motion to articulate the requirement for a tax return? Or is that just a part of the?
I mean, we already had it last time. It was just an option between that or electronic records, and this time they just don't have an option. That's the only thing that they can give us.
Okay.
So I don't think that's a substantial change, because most people did not have electronic records, and we ended up having to use the tax return. 70% of them, as a matter of fact.
But Stephanie, you are taking a 990 as well as, or instead of a tax return, right? Okay.
That is right. Because I didn't have nonprofits with the ability to apply for a loan on the application you just saw, it wasn't on the list of documents. But when I enable that, I will add 990 to the list of documents that can be submitted. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion, and was it seconded? I can't remember. Kelly put forth the motion.
There wasn't a second.
No one
yet.
seconded.
All right. Do I have a second to Kelly's motion?
I'll second it.
All right. Stephanie seconds it. Do I have any further issues that we need to discuss before we vote on this motion? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion that Kelly put forward, say aye or raise your hand. One or the other.
Aye.
All right. Opposed? All right. The motion carries. We'd have to have actually 4 positive votes for anything that we approve. So
That's right.
regardless of how many people show up, we'd have 4 members vote yes to approve any motion.
All correct. I had a motion fail yesterday because they had a majority of a quorum, but not a majority of the whole board.
Right. Just FYI, everybody. So that's why we need at least 4 people there, and hopefully everybody agrees.
Did everybody agree? Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's been approved. The motion's been approved unanimously. So I think we only have 4 voting members there anyway. So
tonight I'm going to modify this application with all the stuff we've talked about. And then I'm going to send the link to everyone just so y'all can go back through it and be comfortable with it. Because I want y'all to see what the public's going to see. And I will send the screen caps of it to Ilka with a bulleted list of the substantive changes that Blaine will want to know about. And I'll copy all y'all on it.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board want to see the updated media release before it goes?
I mean, I assume we're just adding 501c3s and 20 or less to the thing and the application dates.
Ilka, there's no reason not to circulate that to the board.
That's what I figured I would do
fine.
anyway. Okay, so but y'all are okay with me sharing it and then moving forward. Okay. One thing that Jeff offered to do was to set a link from our site on the ACCGov site, so ACCGov/JDA, I think, to make the link a little less onerous in a press release. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
And Ilka and I had this conversation, but we do need to get the list of approved businesses from the Business Alliance, especially before we approve any more grants.
Yeah.
We have to have that list from them, and the sooner the better.
I sent them an email yesterday because I'm working on lining everything up to transfer the funds to them for their grants, for them to be able to pay their grants. And I talked again with Shane Blackwell this afternoon and reminded him about the list. Their timeline is that we're hoping that they'll have their check on Monday to be able to deposit, but their timeline was to begin cutting checks on the 15th. So we'll have their list in time for us when we're making decisions on ours.
Okay, we'll just have to deal with, if there's any duplication, we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that covers that old business. Go to the meeting. All right. We don't have anything listed under new business, so we'll move on to staff report. Okay, you got other things to share?
I didn't make a list for y'all today. We have the policy documents for the public officials insurance policy, so we're official, which is great. And I think everything else I've been kind of updating you as we go.
Okay. All right, Dan, you got anything for the good of the order?
Would you like to hear some more about the constitutional law of nonprofits?
Not today.
In that case, no report.
Okay. All right, we need to set our next meeting. I think we had it on the timeline, but does somebody have the timeline for the next round? When do we set the meeting? October 29th?
Hold on just a minute. It is October 29th. Yes.
Okay. So our next specially called meeting will be October 29th. Is the 5:30 to 7 or an hour and a half enough? 5:30 to 7. Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say,
Fine with me.
I think we'll be at regional meet, so I'll be running around Unicoi.
Well, hopefully Dodd will be on the call if we have decisions that we have to make, because we are, and I'll just remind you, Kelly, we're a member short of our, and so it makes it tough if somebody is missing the meeting to have enough people to take votes.
Our last race might be over by then. In that case, like if it's an emergency, I can jump in on my phone like I did today. And I'll be exempt from carrying anything to the bus.
Okay.
But I don't believe that we don't have any ex officio members, right? So Kelly and Dodd are both voting members, I think, according to the bylaws, correct? Those seats are not necessarily okay.
But in a pinch,
Yeah,
like,
we have. Well, I guess we
our
have 5
last
people here
race.
today, but the chances of us not having 4 directors to make decisions is pretty low. But
Okay.
I'd like to get back up to 7 so we can get extra cushion.
Yeah.
If you wanted to meet on the 28th, I can. That's no problem. It's just that's the regional meet.
Stephanie's got her class on Wednesdays.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done though by 5:15.
Can you get on a call at 5:30 on Wednesday, the 28th?
Oh yeah, totally. I don't know that we're gonna have all the people scored out by then, because that's supposed to finish on the scoring is October 27th. So
A day ahead, right? If we started a day later, then it'll be a day. That'll be.
yeah, I already moved it. I moved it a day.
You are amazing.
Yeah. So we would only have one day to to get the bank, get everything cleaned up, and I don't know that we'll have it cleaned up in one day.
Does anybody have a problem with meeting like that first Monday in November?
Well, it's just that the timeline for them to get the funds out gets pushed when we push it then.
All right.
So we stick then with the 29th to give us a little more chance to process the data.
It would be easier.
5:30 on Thursday, the 29th. And, if you can pop Erica, that's great. Hopefully we'll have enough directors to make decisions.
Yeah, I'll try, especially if there's stuff to be carried to the tent, to the bus. I'm fine with that.
All right, I guess I'll make that a formal motion that we meet on the 29th from 5:30 to 7. Is there a second to that?
I'll second. Stephanie seconds.
All right. All those in favor of that next meeting, say aye or raise your hand. One or the other. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
All right. Did you against it, Tim? Oh, you said aye. Okay.
I was
Never mind.
not against. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Motion passes unanimously. All right. The last thing on the list is to move to adjourn. Is there a second for that?
Second.
All right. Erica does second. All those in favor of adjourning at 6:29, say aye or yeah, raise hands, whatever.
Aye.
All right. We're done.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank